We know that HIV and AIDS affects children in many different ways. The impacts on child protection are profound and often disturbing. Professor Lucie Clover of Oxford and University of Cape Town has conducted research on how HIV and AIDS has an impact on children's protection.
Children whose parents have died of HIV/AIDS are doing significantly worse than children whose parents are healthy or children whose parents are ill with other causes. But AIDS orphan children are clearly starting worse. You see the red line starts higher, and they're getting worse faster than other children. But what about the children whose parents haven't passed away or who haven't yet passed away, but who are living with caregivers or parents who are sick with HIV/AIDS? We found that children whose parents or carers were sick with HIV/AIDS are doing just as badly. And you can see the two middle sections there are those two groups. But what really surprised us as well was a third group, an especially vulnerable group, who we call dual affected. And that's children where one parent has passed away from HIV/AIDS and their current caregiver, who's either their other parent or an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, is also sick with HIV/AIDS. And we see a trebling of vulnerability amongst that group. That children with an AIDS-sick carer are much more likely to be missing or dropping out of school, particularly missing school, they say, to go and collect antiretrovirals and when their caregiver's sick and they need to go into hospital. But they're also much more likely to be hungry at school, and we can see that both AIDS-orphaned, AIDS-affected children and children with other sick carers are really finding it difficult to concentrate at school. And you can see here that what's really leading to these school problems is a combination of the extreme poverty caused by parental HIV and the mental health problems that kids are experiencing. But we also see some really new and really upsetting findings for us. And that's regarding abuse and child maltreatment. And we can see here that in a healthy family, we look at, for example, physical abuse. We can see we're looking at around 5%, and that's what we'd expect to see in a population. And that's trebling when we get up to look at dual-affected children. We also see that weekly emotional abuse is trebling up to 23%. But what we've also found is a doubling of sexual abuse. We found a doubling of intentional neglect and almost a trebling of domestic violence. What's causing this is something we're trying to look at and understand, but what we're finding so far is that it seems to be the massive increased stress on the parents or caregivers. We're seeing that abuse rises when caregivers are stigmatized, when they're exceptionally poor. As they become more disabled, they're more likely to commit all forms of abuse apart from physical abuse. And it seems that it's just a model of extreme stress, and that parenting, just like any other kind of relationship, is much more difficult when you're under a number of complex and interplaying stresses. And we can see here that being in an AIDS-affected family directly predicts your risk, especially for girls, of transactional sexual exploitation. And we can see that girls in a healthy family have around a 3% chance of transactional sex, and going up to a 19% in a dual-affected family. Girls in a healthy family who are not abused and who have enough to eat have a less than 1% chance of having transactional sex. Rising for girls who are abused, living with an AIDS-affected carer and hungry goes up to 57%. More than half of them are having transactional sex. Religious leader support and teacher support were massively influential in improving children's outcomes, but we also see that improving sibling support and especially improving parental praise seems to really improve outcomes for abused children who are AIDS affected. When caregivers went on antiretrovirals, their uninfected children's nutrition and educational attendance trebled. We've also seen really interesting work, Linda Richter's work and very good work on cash transfers, showing that where cash transfers are provided to the family, that children's outcomes improve.